Hi, I'm Tim Stein and welcome to this video in which I talk about how to begin practicing a piece, what you should do before you actually start to play it. Well, if you take this little minuet, this extract from this minuet from Bach's Anna Magdalena notebook, I'll give you some few suggestions that you can apply to any piece you play. And so on. Right, so for example, if you look at the score and you look at the very first bar, you can see a tempo marking, allegretto, so it'll give you an indication as to how fast or how slow the piece will be. You see a key signature with 2 flats, and you see a time signature. The most important thing when you're playing anything is to get a sense of the rhythm. If you don't have any sense of the rhythm, it's very difficult to start putting the hands together. And I would always start with a bar that looks tricky. So let's say, for example, bar 3. There's a little more going on in bar 3 than there is in any other bar. And I've got crotchets in my right hand and quavers in my left hand. How am I going to practice that? Best thing to do before even playing it on the piano is to tap out the rhythm on the piano lid. So, with that in mind, I'm going to tap out crotchets in my right hand and quavers in my left hand. So I'm going to tap out the right hand first of all, and I've got 3 beats in a bar. So I'm going to count aloud my 3 beats. 1, 2, 3. And in my left hand, I've got a crotchet and 4 quavers. Now, if you've got quavers, it's always a good idea to count ands. So, for example, 1 and 2 and 3 and. So now if I put both hands together, I'm going to count the 3 beats, but I'm going to incorporate those ands as well. 1 and 2 and 3 and. And thereby you get a degree of independence. Right hand is doing one thing and left hand is doing something else. If you've got a rhythm like that, where you've got patterns of notes, say for example quavers in one hand and crotchets in the other, if you find that it's quite tricky to call out the counts 1 and 2 and 3 and, a useful tip is just to call out crotchets as tars and quavers as ts. So for example, again taking the same bar, in my right hand I've got tar, 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 and in my left hand tar, t, 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 t. Now, of course, you can't put both hands together, counting out the right hand and counting out the left hand. But if the left hand is the trickiest, then you can just tap the right hand and count the left hand. So, for example, tar, t, 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 t. And another useful tip is that our music is scored in bar lines, so every bar has the same number of beats. It's always a useful exercise to practice across a bar line. Why do that? Why not stop at the end of a bar? Quite simply because if you play a piece of music, and I take that bar for example, most people will stop automatically when they see a bar line. So it's always a good idea to practice across it so that psychologically you don't stop where you see a line. So for example, so you go over to the next beat or the next note of the following bar. Never practice hands together. So if you find the right hand is more difficult, practice the right hand first. If the left hand is difficult, practice the left hand practice the left hand first. Another useful thing to remember is that if you have a score where fingering is written in, don't assume that it's the best fingering. So you want to experiment with that fingering. And I've talked about fingering in a previous video. write in your fingering. If you don't write in your fingering, you won't get any security. I mean, in this case, I've got finger 1 on my G, finger 2 on my A, and finger 5 on my D. And that seems to work for me. And another useful tip is what I call musical mapping, which is something that I think I've discussed before, where you try to take in as many notes in one hand position. Also helps with your fingering. So, for example, if I take the first 4 notes, I can easily accommodate them in one hand position. So the G, the A, the B flat, and the A again, and I can actually accommodate the A as well. The D, sorry, with my 5th finger. So I can basically play all of those notes together without moving my hand out of position. And it's actually quite useful to make note that if you have a next door note, try to use a next door finger. There are occasions where you don't want to do that, but to make things simple, use a consecutive finger on a consecutive note. But always, as I said, write the fingering in. So those are some useful tips on how to practice, and you can apply that to any piece, whether it's a really easy piece or a really difficult piece. The basic principles are the same. I hope you enjoyed that and that the tips will prove useful. Please feel free to tune in to my other videos in this series on the basics of piano playing.